Coming and listening to my journey when I went from Broadway to God's way in search of fulfillment and relationship with God. You know, when I was a very little girl, I did have a relationship with God. As a matter of fact, I remember I was 3 years old, and it was Christmas, and there was a knock at the door, and my mother said, "Honey, go see who's at the door." So I went, I opened the door, and there he was. It was Santa Claus. I was so excited, and he picked me up and went over, sat down, put his arms around me, and he said, "Oh, you've been such a good little girl, and I've got so many presents for you." And I looked in his big blue eyes, and I said, "You have eyes just like my daddy." What I didn't know was that my daddy had dressed up like Santa Claus, so I would have a very special Christmas. You know, from that day and for so many years afterwards, I had this wonderful relationship with God, with my father, and with Santa Claus. I always felt that they were with me and they had their arms around me. And then I went to college. I was raised a Catholic. As a matter of fact, I even wanted to be a nun or an actress. Thank goodness the actress won out. I went to Northwestern, I was studying theater, and I volunteered to work 2 days a week with mentally challenged children. I don't know that you've ever been around a child like that, but they just want love so much. They need it. They hold on to you. They're like little sponges. They hold on to your legs so you won't leave. And I said to God, "God, why? Why did you create children like this? And if you don't tell me, God, I'm not going to speak to you anymore." Well, God didn't tell me, so I didn't speak to him anymore. At first, it was very lonely. I missed not talking to him in the morning and in the evening. But little by little, I kind of forgot about it, and the word separation came into my life. I lost my relationship with God. When I was in college in my junior year, I became engaged to a Roman Catholic who was very, very prominent in the church. We were planning this big wedding, and we spent hours planning for the wedding. And one day I said to him, "You know, I hope that we have 3 children, 2 boys, and then a girl." And he said, "Oh, we'll have boys and girls and girls and boys. You'll probably have 13 children." I said, "Really? Are you planning to carry 10 of them?" Well, he didn't think that was so funny. He didn't even laugh. He said, "Well, that's up to God to decide." And I said, "No, it's not." And he said, "God is the one who decides." And I said, "Oh, no, it's not. I'm going to decide." And he looked at me with this look of horror. He said, "You're not thinking of birth control?" I said, "I certainly am thinking about birth control." Well, that did it. He sent me off to the Jesuits. I spent 3 months on their front porch while they tried to straighten me out. It's a sin. Oh, it's not a sin. It's a sin. No, back and forth for 3 months. And finally, the priest said, "Oh, if you don't believe it's a sin, it's not a sin." Well, that did it. I didn't want to be in a church that had rules for them and different rules for me. So I went back to my fiance and I said, "Look, this is what the priest said, and I'm going to practice birth control." Well, he immediately dumped me. When I got finished with college, I went to Dallas and worked in Margot Jones Theater in the Round. And one night, a man came up backstage and he said, "I'm from New York, I'm a Broadway producer, and I'd like to know what you're doing here." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You belong on Broadway, and if you ever get smart enough to come, you call me, and here's my card." Well, when I went home and told my mother that, she immediately packed my clothes, made a reservation on the plane, and a reservation at the Barbizon for Women in New York. Hungarian mothers are a lot like Jewish mothers. If you don't move, they'll move for you. Off I went to New York. Well, I no longer had a fiance. I no longer had a relationship with God. I was no longer a Catholic. And I found out that my daddy had clay feet. But I did have the card from the man from Dallas. So I called him up, and within 2 weeks, 2 weeks, and I was in a Broadway play. You know what that means? It's every actress's dream. Here I was on Broadway, and people were coming up to me, and they were saying, "Oh, may I have your autograph?" And I felt so important. It was so wonderful. It was so exciting. But I had this emptiness inside of me. It was like a hole. Like nothing seemed to fill me. So I started to fill it with alcohol, and biblically, I knew a lot of men, but it didn't fill me. And then I thought, maybe what I need is to get married. So there was a man, a very elegant, wonderful, very wealthy European who kept asking me to marry him. So I liked him, we were good friends, and I said, okay. So we got married, we traveled all around the world, I met all kinds of famous people, and I learned a great deal, but I still had the hole. And one day I was sitting in the window of our condo on the 19th floor, and I looked down, and I thought, if I just jump, I won't hurt anymore. And for the first time in a long time, I heard the Holy Spirit speak to my heart, and he said, I've given you choice. You don't have to live this life if you don't want it. You're right, I don't. I went in and I said to my husband, I want a divorce. He was devastated. What do you want? What can I give you? You can't give me anything. I just want a divorce. I want to find out what's wrong with me. So he gave me a divorce. I went into business. I went to a men's jewelry company. They did high-end, men's cufflinks. And within 1 year, I was made vice president of the jewelry company. I had broken through the glass ceiling. The New York Times, Gentleman's Quarterly, they were all writing articles about me because I had broken through the glass ceiling. Certainly, that should have made me feel good. I was a success in business, but I still had the hole. I was talking to this friend of mine, and I said, I don't know what to do. I have this hole. And there was a time when I used to feel so good, before that incident with the mentally retarded children. And I said, I talked to God, but he wouldn't talk to me. He wouldn't tell me why he had created them. And she said, that's not God's fault. He didn't do it. That's karma. Karma? What's karma? Oh, she said, those children did something bad in one of their previous lives, and now they have to pay back. Oh, so it's not God's fault. Oh, that's terrific. So I started studying everything I could about karma. I read all of the books by Spalding, all 7 of his books on Masters of the Far East. I read Helena Blavatsky, the one who started Theosophy. I read many of the books by Alice Bailey. I learned how to do automatic writing and how to be a channel for those who had died, who had messages for the people. I did hands-on healing. I was into it up to my ears. And one day, my friend said, do you know there's a man in L.A. who performs miracles? Really? Oh, yes, she said. He changes water into wine. You're kidding. I went in, I resigned, I took a plane, I flew to L.A., and there I met Keith Reinhardt. He had a church called the Aquarian Foundation. I started listening, I started studying, I started teaching, and I did. I saw him. He changed water into wine. I saw stones that big, size of my little fingernail, come out of his eyes. You know what it means if you've got an eyelash in your eye? These were stones came out of his eyes. One came so hard, it hit me in the face. I saw his chest open up and a stone that big, a gemstone, come out. And the next afternoon, or that afternoon, I looked, there wasn't a mark on him. Truly, I must be with someone who is of God. I was so thrilled. Until he called me one day, and he said, Liz, I want you to take over the church. I just went to the doctor, and they told me that I'm going to die. And he said, I want you to head it. And when he said it to me, for the first time, I got to thinking, I still have that hole. this hasn't filled me. I was so busy studying and doing all of these miracle things, I hadn't stopped to think. And I thought, I got to get my head screwed on. There's something wrong. I knew I hadn't been hypnotized. I knew I had really seen the things I had seen, but there was something very wrong with what was going on. My parents had moved to Sacramento, so I flew up to see my mother. My mother always straightened me out. My mother found out that they were looking for someone to host a TV show at one of the local television stations. And she said, why don't you go and at least talk to them about it? Oh, Mama, come on, go. So I went, and I got the job. And within a very short time, it was one of the top-rated television shows. It was wonderful. I was getting all of this publicity. But I still had the hole. I still had that awful hole. One day, at the end of my show, I looked up, and they had a commercial on that was very suggestive. So I went running down the hall to the manager's office, and I said, I want that off my television station, my show, right now. He said, they're one of our best customers. Why, he said, we would lose thousands in revenue. I don't care how much you lose in revenue. I want it off my show. Well, words went back and forth, and I got fired. You ever been fired? Oh boy, is that a blow to the ego. I mean, especially when you are someone who is so important. Well, in about a week or two, I got a call from the legislature, and they asked me to come over to the California legislature to become director of radio and TV. And I did. It was a wonderful job. I was with the movers and shakers. I knew all of their secrets. I knew what went on behind the scenes. I still had the hole. But something wonderful did happen. Something marvelous happened to me while I was there. There was a senator that I became very friendly with. And after a couple of years, we became good friends, and he asked me to marry him. It was really a marriage made in heaven. Unfortunately, I got cancer, colon cancer. And the doctor said you have to have chemo and radiation. I shouldn't be telling it to a place like Loma Linda, but I was not going to go do radiation and chemotherapy. I was going to do it naturally. And so I did. I bought everything anybody told me was natural. My bathroom looked like a pharmacy. Finally, after 8 months of going to the doctor, back and forth about chemo, he finally said, well, that's it. It has now gone into its spread. You're going to have chemotherapy, or don't come back. I really don't want you for a patient. You're the worst patient I ever had. I said, okay, but I don't want to do it for a month. Can we put it off a month? And he said, yes. And I went home and I knelt down and I said, God, I really believed that you were going to cure me. I asked you to cure me and you didn't, and now it's spread. I know I'm prideful, but please, God, tell me what to do. I'll do anything you tell me. I'll even take arsenic, but tell me what to do. The next day, a friend of mine who was in the health business called me, and I told him what had happened, that I was going to have chemo, and he said, that's very interesting. He said, I just had a man in my office who told me he had a cure for cancer. I said, terrific, send it to me. He said, I can't do that. It's never been tried on a person before. I said, that's okay. You can try it on me. I was going to take arsenic, and that would kill me too. So he said, okay, but only 1 drop in a glass of water every 2 hours. Okay? Okay. I'm Hungarian. If 1 drop is good, 10 drops are better. I was taking it by a tablespoon every time I passed that bottle. Well, I went back to see the doctor. He did some tests. He came out. He said, make an appointment. I'll see you in 6 months. And I said, am I cured? And he said, it appears to have gone into remission. I said, thank you very much. I went back. I called my friend. We started traveling around. We were telling people about it. And everything was terrific, except he was an Adventist. Every time he got in the call, it was, Adventists don't do this, they can't do that, and they shouldn't do that. All I ever heard was can't. What a boring church. They didn't know how to eat or drink or dance or do anything that was fun. Finally, I said, look, I'll make a deal with you. I'll go to that church one time. If I don't like it, Don't ever mention Adventism to me again. He said, deal. So we went to church. We went to Sabbath school. It was a disaster. The one woman there knew everything. Have you ever been in that class? She was there. Anyway, we went into the church. The man got up, read the bulletin. Those Adventists are illiterate. Do you know they can't read? And then a man got up who'd never had a lesson, attacked the violin. I'm sitting there getting furious. I am an actress. I am a professional. I'm listening to this amateur. Anyway, finally, the pastor started to speak. And for the first time, I got this wonderful feeling. You know, Blaise Pascal, the French mathematician, says everyone is born with a God hole. And God is the only one who can fill it. And it was God who was filling my heart. The Adventist Church has given me so much. It is truly a book of love, not of don'ts and can'ts and shouldn'ts and wouldn'ts. It's a book that is filled with love. And that's what I found. 13 months after I started taking that product, the man who developed it dropped dead. He left no copy of the formula. We sent it to India. We sent it to the United States. We sent it to Japan. Nobody could break the formula. I know now that was a miracle. God sent that bottle to heal me. There are many of you sitting out here who have experiences with God. I want you to go out. I want you to share them. The world needs for you to share them. After my beloved husband died and I was able to let him go because of the understanding that I had of the state of the dead, God told me to go out and start to share. And that's exactly what I did. I went out, I turned my house into a reverse mortgage, I sold all my jewelry and stock, and I started traveling, building churches and putting children through school, and it was so wonderful, so rewarding. And I tell you, each of you can be rewarded if you will just share your experience with God. My time is running out. I can only tell you a little bit about what was going on. I have written a book called 3 Drops of Arsenic that goes into detail about what my story is. I've also read a DVD, CD for those of you who don't want to read. You can get it either by contacting me or by going to Amazon. And I want to leave you with one quick thing. I have 22 seconds to tell you. The most important thing in your life is your relationship with God. Make a relationship with God by knowing Him, not just knowing about Him, and share it. Go out. The time is short. People need to hear our message. We as Adventists were given the 3 angels' message, and that's what you need to do. God bless you all. May God hold you in the palm of His hand. I thank you so much.